flashes of memory.
I only very recently recalled this memory as I forgot that it even happened to me. Prior to this incident, I'd never experienced anything like it, nor did I ever suffer from hallucinations, not even after the fact. This is the only time I experienced something visual. I've had a couple audible experiences since then, but never visual and undeniably real like this. It could have been explainable, but I haven't been able to figure out how. Maybe you will. I live in Hawaii on the island of Kauai and am a 28-year-old female. Approximately 20 years ago, I was on the island of Oahu visiting family on my father's side. I stayed at my auntie's house with her rather large, height and width-wise Samoan boyfriend. She was about 5 foot and was on the chunky side. She has a daughter, my cousin, who was the same age as me and standing at an average 8-year-old girl's height. You'll see why this information matters. They lived in this neighborhood called Wilhelmina Rize on the bottom floor of a 2-story house. It was set up almost like a fairly spacious studio where the only room was the bathroom. Otherwise, you could see everything in the studio in its entirety no matter where you were standing. There were 2 queen-size beds several feet from each other, one closest to the TV and the other closest to the back wall. I was sleeping in the bed furthest from the TV, on the inside, having the wall closest to me, and my cousin was sleeping next to me, on the outside. My auntie and her boyfriend were, of course, sleeping in the other bed. I want to say it was somewhere between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. when I suddenly woke up. I don't know if I had to use the bathroom or what disrupted me, but I was facing the kitchen when I opened my eyes. Again, yes, everything was in one big room so I could see the kitchen, microwave, front door, etc., from my position. So I opened my eyes and propped myself up a bit and using my elbow to see over my peacefully slumbering cousin. I was puzzled at first as it caught my eye, and I thought, I'm just imagining things, as I begin to rub my eyes and hoping to be rid of whatever was causing this potential illusion. I look up again, knowing it'd be gone because the explanation was my eyes were likely just blurry, causing me to see imaginary things, right? That's what everyone else would expect when something like this happens to someone. But that isn't what happened. Not in this universe. After rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I look up again, and it's in the same spot as it had been. The next step is to pinch yourself, right? That's exactly what I did. Pinch on my arm as hard as I could, to where I had to rub the pain away, as that is still there. My 8-year-old mind was trying to make sense of what was playing out, but it couldn't, and I think maybe that's why I didn't say anything to anyone until very, very recently. Standing in the kitchen and facing the sink, away from me, was what looked to be a figure of a male on the slimmer side, except I couldn't see any details of it. It was as if it were encompassed by a dark, deep, shadowy black. It was a silhouette. Not even the stove's dim overhead light penetrated anything identifiable on it. Other than this entire encounter, the odd thing is, when I first saw it, my half-asleep brain recognized it as my grandma until I looked harder and made sense of where I actually was. But that didn't make sense for a lot of reasons. The main 2 being she's my mom's mom, therefore having no relation to anyone here except me. And 2, she was still alive and well on my home island at the time. She didn't pass away until about a decade later, so it wasn't some sort of omen, I don't think. After I looked at my auntie and her enormous boyfriend sleeping as they're supposed to be, I glanced at the front door thinking maybe someone broke in. From where I was, I could see the chain was still on the door, as was the heavy-duty padlock, meaning the only way that locked doors opening is from the inside. The only window in her place was still intact as well. I was quickly checking explanations off the list and not liking the conclusion I was coming to. My heart was pounding at this point, and the figure still hadn't made a single movement. I rubbed my eyes and pinched myself one last time, hoping I was dreaming. Please, I thought to myself, as I slowly started to lower my body onto the mattress, keeping my eyes on whatever it was that refused to go away. Please keep us safe, and don't let anyone see anything. I stealthily flipped on my other side to face the wall and pulled the covers over my head. I didn't care how hot it was. I was not going to see what's on the other side of this thing, nor was I going to hear anything it does. I silently prayed more to my parents' God and had so much fear and adrenaline coursing through me I thought I would never end up falling asleep. I genuinely had it in my mind that something was about to happen to me. Miracles do happen, as after a millennia passed, I did indeed fall asleep through the rest of the night without any further disturbances. I don't recall what happened the following day, but all I know is nothing was out of place, no evidence of someone MacGyvering their way into the house, and no one else mentioned anything about what I saw. I did tell my dad's mom about this recently, and she genuinely believes that I'm sensitive to anything spiritual or paranormal. She has her reasons, but that's another story. For some reason, I haven't been able to find it in me to agree with her about being sensitive. Maybe it's because I fear these type of encounters, so I consciously shut this stuff out. Maybe because I'm just too skeptical. All I do know is I'd like to never experience seeing a spooky spectral stranger in the middle of the night ever again. So you know those stories where a kid talks to their imaginary friend a little too much? Well, I was one of those kids, but the entity I spoke to was not imaginary. She called herself Bokey. She was tall when I first met her. With pale skin and blonde hair, she reminded me of my mother. I was 4 years old the first time I met Bokey. Well, maybe that's not the right term. I was an adventurous child and would explore the family farm with my trusty sidekick, my German shepherd named Onyx. I saw something move in the woods and looked. But as I saw nothing, I turned to Onyx. Maybe a 4-year-old wouldn't know these things to you, but I grew up with that dog. And will tell you for a fact, I have yet to see that dog so scared in his life as he stood between me and the tree line, letting out a menacing growl into the trees. I thought I felt my mother's hand grab onto mine and lead me back to the house. She told me everything would be all right as she led me inside and closed the door behind me. Imagine my shock when my mother was waiting for me in the kitchen, wondering where I had gotten off to. Bokey was like that at first. She would guide me away from danger when no one else was there. She would comfort me in the middle of the night. She was always around yet. Her presence never scared me or Onyx, who remains by my side to this day. The problems came with time. Something was in the woods, waiting, plotting, and almost ready. Fast forward to the age of 9. My parents have a daughter, and name her Rose. I was already an independent kid. So for the following 3 years, most of their attention was on Rose, but I didn't mind since Bokey made sure I understood. In the middle of the night, as I cried, feeling unloved, Bokey would whisper into my ear that everything would be all right. And thanks to her, I learned to love my sister. At 15, Rose came to me one night. At 6 years old, she had tears in her eyes and only one question. Why won't the nice lady play with me? I asked her what she meant, and the word sent shivers down my spine. Bokey. I had never told anyone that name. I had never even spoken it out loud before that moment. I didn't know what to do. I went to my bed and looked to the side her voice came from. It's all going to be okay, Rose, I tell her sweetly. She slept in my bed with me that night because she was scared. Over the next 3 years, Rose mentioned Bokey a handful more times, but it was always in a positive way. Onyx had puppies, and one of them took a liking to Rose, giving her a companion and a protector on the farm. Last year she was 9 and I was 18. My father and mother were arguing intensely before we were supposed to go out for dinner. A familiar voice tells me not to go. Luckily, Rose began saying her stomach was sore, so I was able to stay to take care of her. When they left, Rose jumped out of bed and began acting normally. When I questioned her as to why she didn't want to go, she shrugged her shoulders. I already knew what it was, but she refused to say it out loud. The hours ticked by that night at a snail's pace. At 4 a.m., I woke up startled with Rose curled up next to me on the couch and 2 police officers at my door. My parents never made it to the restaurant. My dad lost control and they rolled their car off the side of a mountain. We had no other family, so I became Rose's guardian and took over the family business. Today, I sit writing this, staring out the glass at the same woods I did when I was 4 years old. The familiar voice keeping me from leaving. But every time I look up, I see it. A shadow that isn't fast enough. A shape that shouldn't be there. An entity whose presence feels like the void itself stares back at me. Onyx sits by my side, eyes locked to the same woods. The hairs on the back of his neck stand in the way they did when I was 4 years old. Whatever was in those woods came back. And it wants to come in. I still hear Rose talking with one of her friends in the next room over, so I know she is safe. Bokey will keep her safe even if I can't. Let me preface this story with this. While I was an imaginative child at the time of this story, I knew at the age of 6 the difference between imaginary and reality. I had imaginary friends growing up as an only child, but I knew they were just that, imaginary. When I was 6 years old, my mother and I lived in this house that was much bigger than the 2 of us needed. We called it the Big House, and still call it that to this day when talking about our time there. It was a 3-story house. The first floor was comprised of the kitchen, dining room, and living room. The second floor was 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. And the third floor was just 1 large room. That was my room. It doubled as a bedroom and a playroom because of the size. My room had 2 little cubby doors. One opened to a small storage space, the other my mom could never get to open. It had a small oval knob and a keyhole, like one of those keyholes that were meant for one of those skeleton keys. This is relevant later. I was not only an only child, but I also had no neighborhood kids to play with. No cousins or family friends. I blame this fact on why I'm still socially awkward, but I digress. Up until this particularly sunny day, there had not been any unusual activity in the big house. I'm now 33, and yet the memory of this day is still so clear. I just got my first ceramic tea set. The set was a creamy white with a delicate pink flower hand painted on each piece of the set, even the tiny spoons. I had gathered my 2 favorite childhood toys, a rag doll named Rattle and a bear with a clown hat named Snuffy. I'd snuck down to the bathroom and filled the teapot with water, and I was fixing to have my first official tea party. I sat in front of the window where the sunbeams landed on the floor. It was fall, and the spot where the sunbeam hit was always the warmest. I'd been playing with Snuffy and Rattle for about 10 minutes when I realized, while looking down at the tea set, across from me were a pair of light blue shoes. It happened gradually. It's not like they popped into existence. It's more like when you're looking somewhere else, so your brain just doesn't register what you're looking at right away, like that. As I looked up, I saw a girl. She was about my age, with copper hair and a knee-length blue dress with lace around the neck and hemline. She wore a silver locket around her neck and the blue shoes I had first seen. For some reason, I wasn't scared. I just asked if she wanted to have some tea. She just nodded and sat in front of me. It's only years later that I fully realized she made absolutely no noise doing so. I don't know how long we played. She never spoke. Just nod or shake her head. The only noise she made was a peal of laughter. It was after this laughter that I heard my mother open the door at the foot of my stairs. She called, "What are you doing up there? I can hear you squealing all the way down in the kitchen." When my mother had opened the door, I had jumped and looked over my shoulder toward the door. When I turned back to look at the girl, she was gone. Her teacup still full, Snuffy had fallen over, but nothing else had moved. "Just playing with my tea set, Mama," I called down the stairs, still staring at the empty space in front of me. Again, I was more confused than scared. That is, until I heard a squeaking hinge coming from behind me. I whipped around looking for the sound, and there it was. The door to the cubby that I had watched my mother trying for hours to open was open. It was open just an inch. That's it, an inch. I sat where I was for what felt like an hour, just staring. Part of me was waiting for a monster to come out. It felt weird. My little mind couldn't figure out what had happened. I debated yelling for my mom, thought maybe just cry. Finally, I gathered the courage to slowly walk towards the little cubby door. Inside was a very tiny space, maybe 3 feet by 3 feet and 4 feet high. There were some old newspapers and debris from years of being untouched. Then I saw a small ring on the floor, not one you wear, like an old door knocker. I pulled it. As it opened, I heard something slide across the hatch. Once the hatch was opened, I looked down into the little door. I was looking down into my bathroom linen closet. I laughed. Even at 6, I realized I had been spooked by a cubby that just had a secret door to the bathroom. As I was looking down, I heard my mother come into the bathroom. So I waited for her to pass the closet and I yelled, "Boo!" I swear she almost fainted. She opened the closet and started, "You little..." But she trailed off. From above, I watched her looking all around the lower shelves of the closet, which made me giggle. She looked up in surprise, which caused me to slam my little hatch closed. As it closed, I saw what had slid off the hatch. It was a silver locket. Moments after I had closed the hatch, my mom was running up the stairs yelling my name. She asked me how I had opened it. So I told her what I just told all of you. I remember the dumbfounded look she had at the end as I held up the silver, locked, slightly tarnished, and covered in dust. After that weird stuff happened all the time in that house, we would wake up in the morning with every kitchen cabinet open, the water turned on, far away sounding giggles, the washer starting with no one near it. Nothing that bothered my mom, strangely. I kept the necklace until I lost it in 5th grade. I never saw the girl again. I'd seen one other aberration, ghost, spirit, or whatever you want to call them, in our basement the same month we moved. My mother and I lived in this house alone. Keep that in mind. I wanted to blow bubbles, and the giant jug of bubbles was kept on the basement stairs. I went to go get it, and when I bent down to grab them, I could see our washer and dryer. Standing in front of them was a tall, balding man with black hair, a half-unbuttoned plaid shirt, and what appeared to me was black dress pants. When I saw him, he looked directly at me and then was gone. I have a few more weird stories from the big house. Maybe I'll share them later. Until then, have a good spooky season, everyone. Thanks for listening to this Stories to the End. Every Wednesday and Sunday, Flashes of Memory publishes a new story.